Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. Welcome to the 2018 Canadian Grand Prix live commentary stream. As always with these live streams, I am not showing you actual content, video content of the Formula 1 session in progress. This is a commentary-only stream. However, I do invite you to stick around, take part in the live chat going on simultaneously to the commentary here. We are opened up for questions and answers here before the Grand Prix gets underway. It is currently 1:45 local time in the afternoon on the East Coast of the United States. Same in Montreal, Canada, where today's venue lies. We have all of the makings for an absolutely classic race here today. The top 6 starting positions include pretty much every big name in this race. Pole position for car number 5, the Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel. He lines up next to Valtteri Bottas in number 77 Mercedes. P3 on the grid, Max Verstappen. Expect fireworks into turn 1 from him. P4, Lewis Hamilton, the world championship leader, only 4th on the grid today. He was well and truly off the boil yesterday in qualifying. P5 for Kimi Räikkönen in the second Ferrari. P6 for Daniel Ricciardo in the second Red Bull, winner in Monaco 2 weeks ago. P7 for Nico Hülkenberg in the first of the Renaults. P8, Esteban Ocon in the first of the Force Indias. Carlos Sainz in the second Renault in P9. And P10, Sergio Perez in the second Force India. P11 for Kevin Magnussen in the only Haas to take part in qualifying yesterday. Romain Grosjean will be starting from P20 and last after his engine expired in the pit lane at the start of Q1 yesterday. P12 for Brendan Hartley in the Toro Rosso. P13, Charles Leclerc in the first of the Saubers. Not a bad qualifying effort for the young Monegasque. P14, Fernando Alonso in the first McLaren. He is joined by his teammate in P15, Stoffel Van Dorn. Not a great qualifying effort for McLaren. P16, the Canadian native Lance Stroll in the first of the Williams cars. He is followed in P17 by his teammate Sergei Sirotkin. P18, Marcus Ericsson in the second Sauber. P19, Pierre Gasly in the second Toro Rosso. And as we've already mentioned, Romain Grosjean in P20 and last after that engine failure in Q1. I would like to welcome everybody who is joining us here today. Glad to have you all here, and hopefully we are in for an exciting and entertaining Canadian Grand Prix here today. Good afternoon, Jonathan Straitman. Is Verstappen going to crash into the wall of champions? Well, this weekend it almost has turned into the wall of pay drivers. Lance Stroll obviously hitting it on Friday. It is a very tricky spot on the track. It is a very quick right-left chicane to close out the lap, and the wall is very unforgiving and very close to the racing line. We'll see if anybody falls victim to it today. I think what is more likely to see, though, is fireworks or antics of some kind into turn 1. Again, the top 6, we have Vettel, Bottas, Verstappen, Hamilton, Räikkönen, and Ricciardo in the top 6. All of your heavy hitters in the field, they are line astern off the start. It's going to be hectic into turn 1, which of course is very tight, and it leads immediately into another tight corner, which is turn 2. The Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, it is a very unusual track in terms of how Formula 1 tracks go. It's very fast, but it's also very tight. It has concrete barriers around almost its entire distance, and all the corners are very slow and very tight. Long straights, tight chicanes, that is the nature of this circuit. It's also been host to some very entertaining races in the past. Most recently, the 2011 installment of the Canadian Grand Prix comes to mind. It was a 4-hour-long affair, which saw the eventual winner, Jenson Button, start last on the grid, make his way up to the lead, then fall back down to last, then fight his way back up on the final lap to take an absolutely sensational victory. We might be in store for something like that here today. Also, the 2007 race saw the first win for Lewis Hamilton back when he was driving for McLaren. It also saw a tremendous accident for Robert Kubica, who was driving for BMW at that time. 1 year later, in 2008, Kubica would return to win the Canadian Grand Prix. To date, it is the only win in Formula 1 for Robert Kubica. The world feed here from Sky Sports being simulcast by the Living Well Network here stateside in the New York City area. That is channel 467 if you have FiOS in the New York area. Martin Brundle there on his grid walk talking to Bernd Maylander. He is the safety car driver, wondering if Maylander will get some laps leading this Grand Prix. It is always a high likelihood of a safety car being deployed at least once here in Montreal. Such is the nature of this circuit. Brundle really unable to make his way to talk to any drivers yet. Most of the drivers not quite on the grid. The cars, of course, are all assembled, having done their reconnaissance laps. However, they're still being fettled by the mechanics up until the very last moment. Jonathan, what caused the smokescreen of the Ferrari engine in quali? Nobody is quite sure what the cause of the failure for Romain Grosjean was, but it was absolutely catastrophic and instantaneous. The Frenchman pulled out into the pit lane for Q1, and pretty much instantaneously there was a huge plume of oil smoke out the back of the engine. Not quite sure what caused that, but certainly Romain Grosjean going to have an engine change for today's race. Martin Brundle there just talking with Fernando Alonso. Alonso saying, hey, we need some action here today. Well, we'll see if we get any. Brundle now has made his way to talk to Sirotkin, who starts 17th here today. Obviously, the 2018 Williams is very far off the pace. Sirotkin saying, well, we are where we are. There's no point in complaining. We just have to try and do our best. That is certainly a very well-prepared and diplomatic answer. I am sure that both he and Lance Stroll are absolutely livid with the abject lack of pace this year from that Williams. In the background here of the Sky World feed shots, Charlie Whiting and Niki Lauda having a chat there. I do wonder what they are discussing. Charlie Whiting, of course, is the FIA-appointed race director for all of the Grand Prix throughout the World Championship. Niki Lauda, the non-executive chairman of the Mercedes-AMG team. Yes, we actually bring up a good point there in the live chat. Formula One going behind paywalls. It's already happened in much of continental Europe as well as in the British Isles, and I can't quite understand why they would want to take Formula One off of broadcast television. Sporting events are just traditionally broadcast events, unless it's a niche event like boxing, for example. Those have very famously been pay-per-view for decades, but Formula One or any form of auto racing or more traditional sporting events such as football, both here in North America as well as what the rest of the world calls football, soccer. Anyway, sporting events are broadcast events, and with Formula One starting to move toward this paywall, I can't quite understand what their rationale is or what their end game is for that. Are they just trying to make even more money despite already earning billions of dollars a year in TV revenue for all of the sponsorship deals, not only on the cars, but sponsorship deals for the races, trackside signage, all things like that? I can't quite understand Formula One's business model. GT Player 599, hello. I will say that the F1 TV streaming service on the internet, it is very nice, particularly the archival footage that they have there, because you're allowed to go back and watch pretty much any race you want, at least from some recently past seasons. As you start to move out of the 2000s and through the 90s, particularly into the mid-90s, their archive starts to get a bit spotty, but you can see most of the complete versions of recent seasons, at least in the last 10 years, and then of course you do have race highlights for pretty much every other race before that. They are saying that they're trying to roll out new content in terms of older races. However, it might be a little bit slow to get there, because I would imagine that a great deal of those older races might not exist in a digital format, so they're going to have to digitize archival film reels and whatever that they may have. It could take some time, but they do assure us that it is coming. Kristin Gatan, hello! And with the pre-race ceremonies concluded, we are now into that odd buffer period, that 10-minute zone, during which time the Grand Prix would already have been underway, if you go back to last year. However, we're now in that 10-minute bumper period, which Liberty Media claim is to enhance the TV show. Yeah, speaking of Jacques Villeneuve, I believe that he is going to be driving, I think it's a 1979 Ferrari. That would be a 312 T4, I believe it is. Starting this race, I don't know if he's already done that or if he's going to be driving the car on the formation lap, leading the field away. That would be a little bit hair-raising, but perhaps that's already happened. Anyway, Jacques Villeneuve going to do something like that. Obviously, he's the son of the legendary Gilles Villeneuve, for whom this circuit is named. Jacques Villeneuve, also the 1997 Formula One world champion. And yes, in terms of 24 hours of Le Mans, yep, I'm definitely going to be watching that as much as I can. Of course, it is a 24-hour race, and I can't possibly watch it for all 24 hours. Not only could I not stay awake, but they're not airing all 24 hours of coverage, at least not where I am on terrestrial television, but I'll be watching it as much as I reasonably can. Of course, we are going to see Fernando Alonso in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Also, we're going to see some drivers that we know a little bit better stateside. Scott Dixon of the Verizon IndyCar Series will be competing, as will be his colleague Sébastien Bourdais. 8802 Gator, yes. That, of course, is an allusion to the single album that Jacques Villeneuve released, I believe, about 10 years ago now. Let's say he was a much better racing driver. And as we've come to expect in this 10-minute lull before the start of the race, all the mechanics are now just standing around the cars, not really doing much to them. Most of the teams have yet to bolt the wheels on. However, everything else is pretty much done, and yeah, they're just kind of waiting around for a whole bunch of nothing to happen. We still have another 9 minutes before the start of the formation lap. Jonathan Straitman and Jack Barlow both wondering why Hamilton is not on pole for this race. Well, it was pretty clear that Hamilton was just off the pace yesterday. Not quite sure what was going on. I don't know if they've had any problems with that Mercedes or if they just haven't gotten the setup right, or perhaps Hamilton himself just wasn't quite dialed in. There has been some talk leading into this weekend about Mercedes delaying the next spec of their power unit. They're saying that they've had some quality control issues and they don't feel confident introducing the engine quite yet in a race situation. Of course, they're going to continue working on that, and we may see it by the next Grand Prix weekend. However, Hamilton, notwithstanding perhaps any lack of engine power, he just was a little bit all over the place yesterday. He had a big lockup going into the hairpin on what was supposed to be his fastest lap, and, well, it was only good for P4, outclassed by Verstappen, and, more importantly, his teammate Valtteri Bottas, who has been, for all intents and purposes, behind the Englishman for the balance of his time with Mercedes. As far as Hamilton becoming demoralized with Ferrari and Sebastian Vettel being dominant, just look at the results so far this year. Ferrari and Sebastian Vettel have not been dominant. 2 weeks ago in Monaco, we saw that Vettel was really not even able to come close to Daniel Ricciardo in the Red Bull, despite Ricciardo having about a 160 horsepower power deficit with his MGU issue for most of the race. So Ferrari and Vettel, they're certainly not a picture of dominance this year. The Mercedes seems like a much more complete package than the Ferrari thus far in 2018. However, Hamilton just having no answer for Vettel yesterday. And yes, there is, albeit a small chance, there is a chance that Danny Ricciardo could inject himself into this year's title fight. Looking at the Drivers' Championship standings, we can pull that up here on live timing and scoring here. Drivers' Championship, Lewis Hamilton is our points leader with 110. Sebastian Vettel in second with 96. Danny Ricciardo there in third place in the Drivers' standings with 72 points on the board. If Sebastian Vettel were to have an absolute disaster today, it is within the realm of possibility that Danny Ricciardo could overtake Sebastian Vettel for P2. That's very not likely to happen, but it is reasonably within that realm of possibility. We're only about within a 2-race gap of Ricciardo being able to take the championship lead if something catastrophic were to happen to Vettel and Hamilton during this race and the next. But again, it is a very long shot. It is not a strong likelihood at this time, but Danny Ricciardo is not down and out yet in 2018. Jack Barlow wondering if Seb and Lewis could be teammates at Ferrari or Mercedes. Well, I would say Lewis Hamilton will never drive for Ferrari. He's just not that kind of driver. He doesn't seem to have the ability to put himself secondary to the team. And when you drive for Ferrari, and we have seen this through most of Ferrari's history, you are an employee of the company first. Then you're a racing driver. And we've seen this particularly with Ferrari's number 2 drivers, such as Eddie Irvine, Rubens Barrichello, Felipe Massa. When they tell you jump as high as you possibly can because it's your job. I don't think Lewis Hamilton would be willing to do that. I don't think Lewis Hamilton would be willing to support his teammate in a title fight should that be the case. If, let's say, Hamilton were at Ferrari and Vettel remains at Ferrari, if Vettel is the championship leader a few rounds into the season, I don't think Hamilton's going to be yielding to Sebastian Vettel despite them both being on the same team. So I don't think Lewis Hamilton will ever drive for Ferrari. Will Vettel ever drive for Mercedes? I suppose it's a possibility. However, I think Vettel wants to win a world championship with Ferrari simply because you don't go to Ferrari not to win titles. Vettel definitely has that ambition. He still could reasonably do it this year, although the chances are beginning to fade. Now just coming up to about 4 minutes remaining before the start of the formation lap. And Sky Sports just showing some highlights of some Canadian Grand Prix gone by. We just watched Michael Schumacher crash into the Wall of Champions in 1999. Jack Barlow, no, it is not a requirement to be fluent in Italian to drive for Ferrari. However, it does seem that the team does most of its business behind the scenes in Italian, so if you were going to drive for Ferrari, it would behoove you to learn Italian, and we've seen Sebastian Vettel doing that. We saw Michael Schumacher become fluent in Italian during his time at Ferrari, Niki Lauda as well, Jacques Villeneuve. Obviously, he never drove for Ferrari, but his father did, so Jacques just sort of learned it by osmosis. Therefore, yeah, I would say it's an unwritten rule. Ferrari drivers speak Italian. Yes, interesting question of the day. Where was the pit lane here in Canada back in the 1980s when this track was on the calendar in its first few years? Where was the pit lane? The configuration was quite different. Interesting team radio to Lewis Hamilton. They're saying that there's a little bit of oil down on the circuit from one of the classic cars that had been running around earlier. They're telling him, just straddle it if you can. Interesting. Was that classic car the Ferrari driven by Jacques Villeneuve? Is this a little bit of sabotage? That'd be interesting. Anyway, the mechanics are removing the tire blankets. They're lowering the cars onto the ground. We are just about 1 minute away from the start of the formation lap. Mechanics just holding the tire blankets on there for the last possible few seconds to keep those tire temperatures stable. All of the engines, of course, are fired up. The grid is now clearing off, leaving the drivers in their cars all by themselves. We're standing by for the green lights and for 10 past the hour for the start of the formation lap. The grid is clear. Watching the big clock there at start-finish. It has ticked to 10 past the hour. We have green lights at the front of the field, and the field rolls off for the formation lap. It does appear that everybody has gotten away cleanly. A little bit of oil purge smoke from some of the middle rows of the grid, but that is normal. The field making their way through turns 1 and 2. Field just making their way through the end of Sector 1 right now. Coming down to the second chicane, as it were, at this circuit underneath the bridge. I can confirm that everybody has come off the grid. Everybody is rolling. On board here with Lance Stroll, of course the only Canadian in this field. Certainly a very special occasion for him. Front runners have made their way through the hairpin at the end of Sector 2. Now coming up the back straight, back up towards start-finish. And as it always does, the tension of the weekend building up to a crescendo now. The drivers know their start procedures. They know how many burnouts they have to do as they come to the grid. They know which settings they need to lock into their steering wheels for the clutch bite point to get an optimal launch out of their grid slot when those 5 lights go out. We see Sebastian Vettel there making his way to his pole position grid slot, weaving the car quite aggressively. They're trying to raise those front tire temperatures as he begins his set of burnouts to stop in P1. Pole sitter Sebastian Vettel has come to a stop in his grid slot. He has canted his Ferrari over toward the right from his vantage point there. He certainly is looking to cover off Valtteri Bottas into turn 1. It's all going to come down to the start, the reaction from the lights. Who will be quicker out of these top 6? We could get an absolute schmozzle into turn 1, or perhaps everybody will behave themselves. We have seen big accidents into turn 1 off the start here in the past. Will we see so again today? We're about to find out. The final rows of the grid just coming into position. The safety car is in position at the back of the field. Seeing a little bit of breather smoke from one of the Sauber cars there. The field is in position. Green flag goes up in the back. The lights are coming up for the 2018 Canadian Grand Prix. Don't stare. Lights are out, and away we go. Good getaway from Sebastian Vettel from P1. Not such a great start from Valtteri Bottas. Max Verstappen challenging Bottas into turn 1. They do make some slight contact. Bottas has the inside line into turn 2, and I saw a McLaren off there in the back. Couldn't quite identify who it was. The front runners make it through turns 1 and 2 unscathed, now into 3 and 4, the first of the 3 chicane complexes around this circuit. It does appear that everybody in the front has made it through cleanly. And we have very severe contact there between a Toro Rosso. The Williams of Lance Stroll also involved. I don't know who instigated this incident. That is Brendan Hartley in the Toro Rosso, and Lance Stroll has been speared off, a completely innocent victim. Hartley was up on the side there as his car was flying toward the barrier. We need to see what started this contact. It was, indeed, Lance Stroll who got into the side of Brendan Hartley. Lance Stroll was not an innocent victim in this. Stroll started that accident. Brendan Hartley, the left side of the car completely shorn off. On board with Lance Stroll. He just had tremendous oversteer there going through the fast right-hander. The left front suspension completely ripped off Hartley's car. On board with Hartley now. Lance Stroll just completely squeezing him off into the wall, and that's what we mean here in Canada. There is no extra real estate if something does go horribly wrong, as it just did there for Brendan Hartley and Lance Stroll. Brendan Hartley there, I must say, completely the innocent victim in that. Stroll just picked up a tremendous amount of oversteer. The back end stepped out. He could do nothing about it. Brendan Hartley being a little cautious coming out of the car there. I'm seeing some damage to the cockpit surround. not necessarily in the area of halo. Damage in the cockpit surround itself below the level of halo was their incursion into the cockpit underneath the halo for Brendan Hartley. We need to see another angle there, another onboard replay of that incident. Halo does not have any marks on it. The cockpit surround itself was hit by some appreciable piece of debris. We do have a McLaren in the pit lane. I cannot identify who that is at this time. That is Stoffel Van Dorn in the pit lane. They are taking their time with this pit stop. We did see a McLaren off in turn 1. Van Dorn does get back underway now. Safety car deployed, obviously. Our order after one lap is Vettel leading from Bottas, Verstappen, Hamilton, Ricciardo, and Raikkonen, your top 6. Ocon, Hülkenberg, Sainz, and Perez round out your points runners at the moment. World Feed picking up Lance Stroll there. He's made his way over to one of the pavilions there. He's just sort of chilling out. Brendan Hartley still hasn't taken his helmet off. He's talking with some rescue workers there. Brendan Hartley appears to be fine. Just shell-shocked a bit, it would seem. A replay of the start here on the World Feed. Very good getaway from Sebastian Vettel. He did get a much better launch than Valtteri Bottas. And then Max Verstappen there challenging Bottas into turn 1. There is another angle of the replay there between Stroll and Hartley. That very scary looking incident, I must say. Trying to see if there was actually incursion into the cockpit. Again, I did see damage on the cockpit surround there for Brendan Hartley. In replay there, indeed, there was incursion of some suspension pieces into Brendan Hartley's cockpit there. A little difficult to see, but the wheel tethers on the left front of Hartley's car were completely severed, and some reasonably small suspension components did make their way up toward the cockpit right underneath the main hoop structure of Halo. Still under safety car, working lap 3 of this Canadian Grand Prix. The order, of course, unchanged at the front as the field is frozen. Vettel leads from Bottas, Verstappen, Hamilton, Ricciardo, Raikkonen, Ocon, Hülkenberg, Sainz, and Perez. Your top 10 out of this race, as we have been talking about, Lance Stroll and Brendan Hartley. Well, we were wondering as to whether or not we would see the safety car today. Lap 1, and we already have our first safety car period. Corner marshals here just lifting Lance Stroll's car out of the way now. This is going to take a while. Williams of Lance Stroll now being pulled behind the fence. We are seeing some of the after effects of Brendan Hartley's incursion into the barrier there, airborne. Big streak of rubber across that branding there on the wall. Obviously, Hartley nearly coming over the top of the wall. Very lucky not to get up into the catch fencing there. Replay of the start from Daniel Ricciardo's perspective. Ricciardo also getting a decent launch. Kimi Räikkönen immediately in front of him seemed to get a little bit better of a getaway. That Ferrari start system seems like it is hooked up. Ricciardo challenging Räikkönen through turn 2. He has the inside line through the turn 2 exit, and he manages to overtake Kimi Räikkönen there. Safety car period is coming to an end. From race control, lights are out on the safety car. Sebastian Vettel now becoming the de facto safety car. He fended off Valtteri Bottas at the start of this race. He will have to do so again. Advantage, however, to Sebastian Vettel in that he decides when we go. Max Verstappen looking very racy behind Valtteri Bottas. He's definitely going to try and capitalize here into this now 5th lap when the race resumes. Sebastian Vettel still holding the field up. They're all stacking up behind Sebastian Vettel. Vettel still has not quite said go yet. Now Vettel drops the hammer going into the final chicane. Past the wall of champions, Sebastian Vettel clear and away, your race leader, resuming here the Canadian Grand Prix on lap 5 of 70. Max Verstappen hunting Valtteri Bottas. We have a Force India off at turn 1. That was Sergio Perez off at turn 1. He lost a whole bunch of positions, however, he has rejoined without incident. It was contact with Carlos Sainz that punted Sergio Perez off very sideways at turn 1. Very good job by the Mexican not to stall the car there, as at one point he was effectively driving backwards. Into the hairpin, Sebastian Vettel leads Valtteri Bottas by 1.5 seconds already. Bottas followed just 0.6 of a second behind by Max Verstappen. Verstappen will be in DRS range as they run right now when DRS is enabled. We are expecting DRS to be enabled on lap 7. Lance Stroll and Brendan Hartley officially under investigation for their tussle. Honestly, I would put that in the fault of Lance Stroll. However, he did just pick up some snap oversteer there and simply ran out of room trying to recover it. Brendan Hartley had already committed to the maneuver, and he was pushed out of room by the somewhat out of control Lance Stroll. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel sets fastest lap so far, 1:16.945, the only car in the 1:16 range. Field is now calming down as we're working lap 6 in this Canadian Grand Prix. We have been talking about Canada throwing some surprises in our general direction, and already 6 laps into this race, we've seen one surprise. Will we see more? I'd say there's a very good chance of that. The word from race control, DRS has been enabled, working lap 7 of 70. Looks like everybody has calmed down, everybody obediently following each other for the moment. Following the McLarens here, we have Fernando Alonso running in P11, Stoffel Van Dorn running in P18. Van Dorn has already made a trip to the pit lane. Also, the turn 1 incident between Sainz and Perez now under investigation. Sebastian Vettel, meanwhile, resetting fastest lap at 1:16.315, compared to Valtteri Bottas, 1:16.752 last time by. Verstappen slightly quicker than Bottas last time by at a 1:16.712. World Feed finally picking up Max Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas. They are running very closely together through turns 1 and 2. Now on board with Nico Hülkenberg, as he is in pursuit of Esteban Ocon also through turns 1 and 2. Hülkenberg definitely within DRS range. 3 DRS zones around this circuit for this 2018 race. We'll see if Hülkenberg is able to convert that advantage into an overtake anytime soon. Minecraftian513, yes, we are all hoping that Ferrari could actually convert that pole position into a win. Ferrari in a little bit of a slump at this point in the season. They were very dominant at the beginning, however they have fallen off the pace big time. We need them to come back if we're going to have any hope of a fight this year for the Constructors' Championship. Nico Hülkenberg with his DRS open, however he's not quite close enough to Esteban Ocon in front to mount an attack. Under braking now for the final chicane. He turns right, he turns left. Meanwhile, that is Charles Leclerc and Fernando Alonso having a big scrap for P10. Leclerc has it, Alonso wants it. Alonso with DRS advantage coming over start-finish into turn 1. Alonso going around the outside into turn 1. Leclerc has the inside line, and he quite unbelievably holds off the much more seasoned Spaniard. That is some incredible driving from both of those gentlemen. However, hats off to Charles Leclerc. World Feed continuing to follow this battle through Sector 2. The gap is just half a second between Leclerc and Alonso. The young Monegasque definitely doing a very good job. He is fighting well above his pay grade, I must say. And also, that Sauber looks like it is planted, doing everything that he wants to do. The McLaren also looking pretty good. Fernando Alonso, of course, is legendary for making bad cars go well. That seems to be the case once again here today. Alonso in range for another DRS-assisted attack into the final chicane. World Feed pulls away from it as we watch the front runners coming down start-finish now. Watching timing and scoring to see what happens with Leclerc and Alonso. On board with Fernando Alonso, not quite close enough to try and overtake into the final chicane. Alonso is probably going to try a second working of that move that he attempted on the previous lap into turns 1 and 2. The Spaniard is a bit farther away this time, unable really to mount a challenge into turns 1 and 2. Meanwhile, Perez has just visited the pit lane and out. He has fitted which tires onto that car, trying to find him through timing and scoring. He has fitted the soft compound, the super soft compound, rather. Working lap 10 of 70. The two Renaults running line astern there in positions 8 and 9, Hülkenberg and Sainz respectively. Meanwhile, the gap at the front, Sebastian Vettel has extended his lead over Valtteri Bottas. The interval is now 3.5 seconds. Sebastian Vettel, meanwhile, resetting fastest lap, a 1:15.475 is the only car running in the 15s. That Ferrari is working very well today. Carlos Sainz with DRS on his teammate in front, however not close enough to convert that into any real advancement of his track position. The gap between Hülkenberg and Sainz remains 0.7 of a second. Esteban Ocon dives into the pits, releasing the two Renaults of Hulkenberg and Sainz. Ocon stops on his marks. The Force India mechanics go to work. Off go the 4 old tires. On go the 4 new tires. And they release the Frenchman quick as you like. About a 3-second stop. Not slightly slower than that. 4.8 seconds. That is actually quite biblically slow in modern Formula 1. 4.8 seconds. Remember the days when pit stops used to last 10 to 15 seconds? If a team were going for a one-stop strategy, putting a lot of fuel in, those days are long gone. Yes, Jonathan Straitman, good observation. Max Verstappen, the only one of the front runners on the Hypersofts. Obviously, he's been on those tires from the race start. He is unable, really, to make any inroads on Valtteri Bottas in front. The gap between Bottas and Verstappen has grown to 2.5 seconds. The gap between Bottas and Vettel, both running on the Ultrasoft compound, 4 seconds exactly. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel sets another fastest lap of the race at 1:15.349. Bottas cannot respond despite going fastest in Sector 2. His last lap time of 1:15.689. The Ferrari is about 0.3 a lap faster than the Mercedes. Speaking of Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton still in 4th place. 4th position for car number 44. His last time by was a 1:16.466. He is nearly a full second a lap slower than his teammate. Lewis Hamilton, his problems remain today. Replay of Ocon's pit stop in the Force India. We're watching the right rear. Let's see, what was the problem here trying to get that right rear tire off? Ah, yes, the rear jackman. He had to have 2 bites at the cherry there trying to get that jack position. They couldn't get the rear of the car off the ground to remove the rear tires. That's the reason for the longer stop, and I say longer relatively, 4.8 seconds. We're still not talking about a very long time here. On board with Nico Hulkenberg, making a pit stop onto the super soft tires, quick as you like. 3.8 seconds there, that's more like it. Valtteri Bottas goes purple in Sector 1, 20.794. Compare that to Sebastian Vettel last time through Sector 1, 20.907. Despite all that, Bottas still a little bit slower per lap than Sebastian Vettel. Vettel's last lap time a 1:15.521. Bottas's last time a 1:15.561. Carlos Sainz makes a pit stop 1 lap after his teammate. Jack Barlow, interesting question. Do the drivers have to be careful when getting in or out of their cars to avoid damaging them? The simple answer is yes. Particularly around the sides, you will see that there are various aero appendages around the cars. Meanwhile, Daniel Ricciardo radio saying that he's struggling a little bit. Tires are going off. Ricciardo running on the Hypersoft tires from the start of this race. Anyway, to finish that point, there are multiple complicated aero appendages on these cars, and if a driver were to accidentally kick one as he's getting in or out of the car, the team would not be very amused by that. So they do have to watch out. World Feed picking up Lewis Hamilton for the first time today, still running there in a quiet 4th place on the ultra soft tires from the word go. He's fighting off Daniel Ricciardo, who is within DRS range. The gap between Hamilton and Ricciardo on track is 0.7 of a second. Ricciardo does have DRS on the Englishman, not close enough to mount an attack. I think Ricciardo and Hamilton both pretty much equally struggling with their tires, despite Ricciardo being on the theoretically faster Hypersofts. Pensive faces on the Mercedes pit wall as well as on the Red Bull pit wall. I do think these Hypersoft tires have caught out some of the front runners, and of course Montreal is traditionally a tire-killing circuit as well as a brake-killing circuit. Just high speeds here. Lewis Hamilton dives into the pits. Daniel Ricciardo will inherit 4th place for the moment. Max Verstappen also in the pits ahead of Hamilton. Good stop for Max Verstappen. 2.5 seconds was the stop time there for the Dutchman. Lewis Hamilton in the pits, 2.8 seconds. Hamilton also released and resuming. And yes, it does appear that Hamilton does not have a contract yet for next year. I think he's waiting to see what happens with this championship. I would not quite put it past Lewis Hamilton to retire at the end of this year if he were able to win the World Championship for a 5th time. However, he is a racer, he is a competitor, and I'm sure, just like every other racing driver, he thrives off of being competitive. In replay, Lewis Hamilton very nearly getting on the grass there as he's resuming next to Charles Leclerc. There's a lot of dust down there on the extreme outside edge of Turn 1. Mercedes still preparing for a pit stop. Obviously, Valtteri Bottas will be next to come in. 4.7 seconds exactly behind Sebastian Vettel. Daniel Ricciardo diving into the pits now. On board with Daniel Ricciardo briefly as he makes his way to his pit box. On to the super soft compound. Quick as you like. 2.5 seconds there for that stop. Ricciardo resumes. Max Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo now running line astern in 4th and 5th. They are both on the super soft tires. That is a straight fight now. Meanwhile, fastest lap once again to Ferrari, Sebastian Vettel, a 1:15.210. He's going to be in the 1:14s before too long. Also, yes, we do have a real change in position now. Lewis Hamilton down to P6. Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen now both ahead of him. Toto Wolff looking on. He knows that his man has lost out to Daniel Ricciardo. He is not amused by that. Mercedes really not having a great day by their standards. Valtteri Bottas still running in P2. However, he does have a stop yet to make, as does leader Sebastian Vettel and P3 Kimi Räikkönen. The gap between Ricciardo and Hamilton here in real time, it is 1 second, 1.074. Jack Barlow, your question. Because Halo was not unanimously agreed on by all teams, does it mean it won't be used in 2019? No. Unfortunately, the FIA does have the power of fiat, which is a legal term meaning be it made so, literally translating from the original Latin. Basically, the FIA can say, we want this, therefore this is the way it is, and it doesn't require any input from anybody. They can dictate whatever happens in Formula One. They allow the teams to vote on certain things as a common courtesy, but the FIA has an absolute 100% totalitarian grasp on this sport. Whatever they say happens. Charles Leclerc diving into the pits now. He was on the ultra soft tires. I'm expecting him to go to the super softs on this stop. Looks like we're going to see a two-stop race here today. We are still way too early for these guys to make it the remaining 50 laps on their next set of tires. Waiting to see which tires went on Leclerc's car. Super softs as we had projected. He resumes, appears to be in P13, ahead of Fernando Alonso once again. Jonathan Straitman, yes, good point. Formula One is trialing a visor cam. We saw it with Pierre Gasly in Monaco, and we've seen it with Romain Grosjean here in Canada. We've yet to see it used in the live broadcast. However, it does appear to be at driver's eye level. What is confounding about it is the fact that they are censoring the steering wheels. And it, for me, it completely spoils the view. I understand that the teams want to keep some things under wraps, but if you're not going to allow the fans to get a 100% accurate representation of what it's like to drive a Formula One car, why bother doing it? Again, I will toot the horn of IndyCar. They've had visor cams for a few years now, and everything is right there out in the open. It provides some spectacular views. Formula One, get your act together. Give us a visor cam in the live broadcast. On board with second place runner Valtteri Bottas on the ultra soft tires. His tires still look to be in reasonably good condition. Not too many lurid moments going on with that Mercedes. And the world feed now picking up race leader Sebastian Vettel, who leads this race by 5 seconds over Valtteri Bottas. A little bit of a lockup there for Vettel into the hairpin. However, all very much under control for the German. In replay here, that lockup for Sebastian Vettel into the hairpin, just a small one. That won't really hurt the tire too badly. Sebastian Vettel, despite his tires now being 25 laps old, still running faster than Valtteri Bottas. 1:15.360 last time by. Bottas responded with a 1:15.5 dead. Kevin Magnussen takes to the pit lane in the Haas. Meanwhile, his teammate Romain Grosjean has made his way up into 8th place from starting last. Magnussen exits the pits, I believe, on the soft tires. Indeed, he has. Lewis Hamilton, he is having one of his characteristic bad days. Mercedes telling him we are still not quite safe to Raikkonen. Of course, they are talking about the pit stop rotation, and, well, Hamilton saying, well, there's not a whole lot I can do about it. So Lewis Hamilton not in his happy place today. TV graphics once again. Formula One management. Daniel Ricciardo appears to be stuck in first gear, and now the graphics have caught up with themselves. I was going to say, doing 280 kilometers an hour in first gear, that would be pretty incredible for the Red Bull. Working lap 25 of 70. The pace has slowed down a little bit. Not quite at the front, but everybody else just backing off a little bit. I would assume trying to keep some life in their tires. Nico Hülkenberg, meanwhile, with DRS assistance, makes easy work of Romain Grosjean for P7. Grosjean, however, he is having a quiet but very productive day. He's up into P8 now after having started last. Once again here in replay, Sebastian Vettel with a bit of a bigger lockup into the hairpin. Waiting for that tire to start rotating. We didn't quite see the damage to it. I would assume there is somewhat of an appreciable flat spot on it now. Surely Sebastian Vettel needs to come into the pits any time now. His tires are 28 laps old. We're working lap 26 of 70 of this Canadian Grand Prix. Meanwhile, Carlos Sainz in replay has overtaken Romain Grosjean for P8. Grosjean now down into P9. Still a very good day so far for the Frenchman. He hasn't had too many good days this year. He needs one. Blue flags for Marcus Ericsson. He is about to become the first car to go one lap down today. Yes, the gap has come down a little bit between Vettel and Bottas. The gap is now 3.7 seconds. Sebastian Vettel getting DRS on Marcus Ericsson, that would have to be, as he goes to lap the Swede. Brendan Hartley only now making his way back into the paddock area. That's a long time to go a short distance for the New Zealander. Again, in replay, the world feed showing us that incident between Brendan Hartley and Lance Stroll, which put both gentlemen out of the race. That was a scary moment for Brendan Hartley, going up very nearly into the catch fencing. Thankfully, he stayed out of it. But the right front wheel and suspension assembly completely ripped off of that Toro Rosso. Looking at the climatic conditions here in Montreal, the sun appears to be obscured by some cloud cover. Again, we're not really expecting any precipitation for the duration of this race, but it has gotten a little bit cloudy here at Montreal. Expecting that to be temporary. You can get a sense, though, of just how hot the track is looking at those inferior mirages on the longer shots. You see the reflections of the trackside signage and the underside of the cars there. Very cool optical effect. Meanwhile, for anybody who cares, Sergei Sirotkin has made a pit stop. He's now on the Ultra Softs, running dead last. Some very interesting reporting coming from Ted Kravitz in the pit lane. Apparently, there was an error in Lewis Hamilton's car setup. The car is overheating. They blanked off a little bit too much space in terms of those louvers that we see across the midships bodywork on these cars. And during Hamilton's pit stop, they actually cut away some of the carbon just to try and get some air, quick and dirty, into that car to cool things down a little bit. That could be part of the reason for Hamilton being off the pace, but he was off the pace yesterday as well, so clearly that is not the only thing that is hampering the Englishman today. Jonathan Straitman, I have to say that I have visited Canada on 2 occasions, and I have met several Canadians, and I have to say, without exception, they are all very nice, well-civilized, well-educated people. And Canada itself, I have not even come close to seeing the entire country. Canada, of course, is the second largest country on the planet, but whenever I have been there, it has been very clean, very organized. All in all, a very pleasant place to be. Sebastian Vettel, yes, he is getting on with the program here. He's reset fastest lap of the race, a 1:15.059. We're going to see 1:14s before this day is over. Meanwhile, we have Esteban Ocon on Romain Grosjean. Grosjean able to hold off the Frenchman. We have a tete-a-tete of Frenchmen here going on. Ocon with DRS assistance into turn 1 on Romain Grosjean. Grosjean able to close out the racing line there and maintain his position. This is a fight for P9. Grosjean still running in the points. Very remarkable drive by Grosjean today. On board with Lewis Hamilton here running in P6. Into the hairpin. Full lock right. Feeding the power back in, trying not to spin up those rear tires too much as you accelerate down the back straight. Lewis Hamilton asking his pits, why did they stop so early? They respond, we pitted early because we have a PU problem, a power unit problem. Clearly that was the cooling issue that Ted Kravitz was alluding to earlier. I'm rather surprised that Hamilton would not have seen some high temperature indications in the cockpit. Perhaps he's not paying attention, or perhaps Mercedes, quite quizzically, wouldn't have instrumentation for that on board. That would be quite odd indeed. Hesitated eye, interesting question. If the safety car were to come out now, who would this benefit? Well, it definitely would benefit our top 3 runners who all have yet to stop, as effectively they could get a free pit stop under safety car conditions. It could also potentially benefit Max Verstappen, 14-lap-old super softs. His teammate Ricciardo right behind with 13-lap-old super softs. Hamilton in the same boat as well. It would be very interesting to see if the top 6 would all pit at the same time, potentially even the top 10, if they would all pit at the same time. Maybe put on another set of super softs, try and make it to the end of the Grand Prix. Perhaps we'll see that happen, perhaps we won't. Interesting graphics here from FOM. Audio up. Is this a nod to NASCAR coverage here? Meanwhile, Kimi Räikkönen in the pits here for his first stop. I have to presume this will be his only pit stop as well. We're pretty much at the halfway point. Räikkönen on to the Supersoft compound, and away we go. Lots of dust in that Ferrari pit box. Perhaps a little bit of oil purge smoke as well from the breather at the back of that Ferrari. Räikkönen is resuming. There is Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton just ahead of Räikkönen there. They both have to negotiate Sergei Sirotkin there, the lap traffic, the sole remaining Williams. Sirotkin there really helped Lewis Hamilton consolidate that position ahead of Räikkönen. Mercedes radio to Hamilton saying, "Strap 5, it's hammer time." Hamilton responds saying, "It's already there." Critically, for Lewis Hamilton's race, he is ahead of Kimi Räikkönen. Again, to recap, Räikkönen has made his pit stop. He is on the Supersofts. Hamilton also immediately ahead on the Supersofts, but they are 16 laps old. We'll see what Kimi is able to do with that pace. We'll also get an indication of what Sebastian Vettel may or may not be able to do on those Supersoft tires, to which I presume he will switch at his pit stop. He is currently running 36-lap-old Ultrasofts. Yet to stop are Sebastian Vettel and Valtteri Bottas. Vettel last time by a 1:15.586. Bottas in P2, 5 seconds behind Vettel. His last time by a 1:16.569. Kimi Räikkönen, fastest lap of the race, 1:15.026. That's getting on with the program here. Sebastian Vettel still on those Ultrasoft tires, with which he started at 1:15.167 last time by. The gap at the front, Vettel to Bottas, 6.072 seconds. The gap between Hamilton and Raikkonen is exactly 1 second at this time, with Raikkonen getting the fastest lap of the race last time by. Will the Finn have DRS assistance on Lewis Hamilton coming down the backstretch? It is certainly possible. They've just passed the detection zone there for the third DRS zone on the course of the lap. Hamilton is about 0.2 slower per lap than Kimi Raikkonen at this point. His tires are about 15 laps older. Raikkonen not getting DRS assistance down the start-finish straight, nor the back straight, just not quite close enough to the Mercedes in front. Hamilton appears to have his 5th place consolidated at this time, however that could all change at a moment's notice. The gap between Hamilton and Raikkonen now has extended itself a little bit to 0.858. Daniel Ricciardo, meanwhile, sets fastest time in Sector 1, 20.621. Vettel, for comparison, 20.904 last time through Sector 1. Hesitated eye, that is definitely a good point. Vettel is on very old tires at this point. They are 39 laps old. He does need to come into the pits. Valtteri Bottas has blinked for the pit lane, his first stop of the day. Mercedes are well prepared for their man. He approaches the pit box, drops the car into neutral, looks for his marks, stops on those marks, off go the old tires, on go the new ones, super softs for Bottas, and released, quick as you like, 3.2 seconds. That pit stop for Mercedes. Bottas resumes, appears where he came out from. P2, Valtteri Bottas. No change in his track position. Ferrari need to pit Sebastian Vettel right now, because now Bottas has the fresher tires. Ferrari have the delta time in hand on the pit stop. The gap is 24.608. The pit lane time is about 23 seconds, and Ferrari in the pit lane right on time. Will Vettel dive into the pits this time? Indeed he does. He straight lines the final chicane. There is the pit entrance. Sebastian Vettel, race leader for Ferrari in the pit lane. On the marks for Sebastian Vettel, off go the old, on go the new super softs for the Ferrari. 2.7 second pit stop, that was faster than Bottas's time. Off of the pit lane speed limiter comes Sebastian Vettel. He should resume quite handily in the lead of this race, and indeed he does. Back onto the racetrack for race leader, car number 5, Sebastian Vettel, still in P1. Vettel and Bottas at this point should still be good to go to the end of the race. The gap has consolidated to 5.738 seconds between Vettel and Bottas at this time, so pretty much status quo as to where it was. Vettel lost essentially no time overall making that pit stop. Working lap 39 of 70 in this Canadian Grand Prix. The gap at the front remains stable at 5.3 seconds between Sebastian Vettel and Valtteri Bottas. Max Verstappen is a further 5.7 seconds down the road there. He is in P3. Again, 5.7 seconds behind Valtteri Bottas. Daniel Ricciardo behind his teammate Verstappen in P4. 2.9 seconds is the gap between the Red Bull drivers. Valtteri Bottas, fastest lap of the race, a 1:14.512. That is very quick indeed. What can Sebastian Vettel do to respond to the pace of Valtteri Bottas? That is exceptionally quick in race trim, a 14.5. Will the Ferrari respond? Vettel goes purple in Sector 3 with a 29.966. His last lap time, a 114.568. Personal best for Vettel, not fastest lap of the race. I'm expecting Vettel to reset fastest lap on this time, though, lap 40 of 70. And that fast lap was a fluke for Valtteri Bottas. His last lap time, a 114.976, almost a second slower. Half a second slower, rather. On board with Perez in P14, watching the Force India work. Everything looks pretty copacetic on board for the Mexican. There it is, Sebastian Vettel, fastest lap, a 114.163. Of course, the fuel load is burning off all the time. That Ferrari is very quick at this point. Could we see 113s before this day is done? Raikkonen getting some coaching from the Ferrari pit wall, saying we do not have a problem with the brake temperatures, ignore the alarm. So some instrumentation faults on Raikkonen's number 7 Ferrari. The gap between Vettel and Bottas has now increased to 5.8 seconds. At this point, the only driver who has yet to make a pit stop is Romain Grosjean, running in P9. Undoubtedly, they are trying to play the chances of there being a safety car. However, that is becoming less and less likely as this race continues to tick by the laps. Grosjean has 40 laps now on his ultra-soft tires. Meanwhile, Kimi Raikkonen and Lewis Hamilton continuing to run line astern. Hamilton in P5, Raikkonen in P6. The gap between those two gentlemen is 2.3 seconds. Sebastian Vettel purple in Sector 1 at 20.442. Seeing a McLaren going slowly, that is Fernando Alonso. Indeed, he is going slowly. He's not just trying to let some traffic by. Problem. McLaren on the radio to Alonso saying, we need to retire. We will return to the garage. I'll tell you, McLaren just cannot get a car to hold itself together for Fernando Alonso. Alonso still, despite his advancing years and despite all of his time in Formula One, he remains one of the most talented drivers we have ever seen. And we cannot get a car to hold together for this guy. He needs some sort of miracle. He needs that shot in the arm to restore his motivation. We've seen him go out to Indy. We have seen him go to the WEC and win at Spa. We're going to see him at Le Mans next weekend. But Fernando Alonso, in the pinnacle of motorsport, just has no luck at all. I have to say, Fernando Alonso, the last few years of Fernando Alonso's career have been the biggest tragedy that I've ever seen in my time watching Formula One. Here we have clearly one of the best talents ever to drive a Formula One car, a two-time world champion, still physically and mentally capable of fighting at the front, but he has absolutely no opportunity to do so. If Fernando Alonso were still at Ferrari, he would be leading the World Championship right now. That I can promise you. However, it just did not align for Fernando Alonso. Next year, where could we see him? Could we see him leaving Formula One and doing a full-time stint in IndyCar, perhaps? There is chats of McLaren running an IndyCar team for 2019. It is possible. Will we see him full-time in the WEC? Again, anything is on the table at this time. What McLaren really need to do is bring back Ron Dennis. They need to get a deal with Mercedes, a works deal with Mercedes, get exactly the same equipment as the factory cars, and they need to entice Adrian Newey to come back. They need all of that and then some. But McLaren, they have completely lost all senses of self-efficacy. They can't negotiate good terms with their suppliers anymore. They can't attract good sponsors anymore. And apparently their design team, I don't think it's so much an aero problem as it is just an overall chassis configuration problem, as they were unable to integrate the Honda power unit, and it appears this year they're unable to integrate the Renault power unit into that McLaren design. They just have completely lost pretty much all of their ability to design a fast and reliable car. It is a tremendous shame to see the once mighty McLaren team falling so far. Meanwhile, watching timing and scoring again, Verstappen goes fastest in Sector 2 at a 23.716. Vettel last time through Sector 2 at 23.819. Blue flag for Perez in P14. The front runners obviously have made it up that far at very least. Verstappen last lap time a 1:14.519. Vettel's last lap time a 1:14.438. Bottas in P2, his last lap time a 1:14.519. So Bottas and Verstappen running absolutely identical lap times at this moment. "23 laps to go now in this Canadian Grand Prix." Again, the race has calmed down quite significantly after an absolutely chaotic start. Everybody behaving themselves. Out of this race are Alonso, Stroll, and Hartley. Lance Stroll and Brendan Hartley taken out in the same accident on the first lap, and Fernando Alonso, our most recent retirement with some sort of mechanical failure. As they run right now, Sebastian Vettel would be retaking the lead in the Drivers' Championship by 1 point. over Lewis Hamilton. All Hamilton needs to do to maintain his championship lead is make up one more position. He is 1.5 seconds behind Daniel Ricciardo, and he is lapping about 0.4 a lap faster than the Australian, so that is reasonably possible at this point. Watching down to Ricciardo. He's lapping Kevin Magnussen there. Magnussen running in P13. Lewis Hamilton also making his way past Kevin Magnussen into turn 1. Magnussen quite wisely yields the track position. On board with Carlos Sainz in the Renault, what are we about to see here? Ooh, very nasty double lockup on the front end there for the Spaniard. He takes to the escape road and resumes with no problem. Romain Grosjean being pushed off wide there by one of the Force Indias. He finally takes to the pit lane, though. His ultra-soft tires are 49 laps old. This is his first and presumably only pit stop onto the super soft tires. Goes the Frenchman back out into the pit lane, and no smoke to be found from the Ferrari engine in the back of that Haas. He was running there with Esteban Ocon, who was on the racing line, to his credit. Grosjean taking to the grass, and wow, there was such a vibration from the left front tire on Grosjean's car as he was heading toward the pit lane there. Tire was very much at the edge of failure. Meanwhile, Stoffel Van Dorn pits and out in the sole remaining McLaren, a 3-second pit stop. Van Dorn resumes on the Hypersoft tires in P16. Lewis Hamilton is hunting down Daniel Ricciardo. He is about 0.3 a lap faster than the Australian. Again, if Hamilton can get this one more position, he'll retain the championship lead if he finishes in P4. Ricciardo, of course, will have none of that. And yes, of course, those of you participating in the chat, we are talking about the French Grand Prix, which is the next race on the Formula One calendar in 2 weeks from the Paul Ricard circuit. Formula One visiting there for the first time since 1990, I believe. The track was a very popular testing venue in the days of yore. However, really hasn't seen too much Formula One action in the last 10 years. The circuit, it has a wide variety of configurations available. It has a very sophisticated track surface and very expansive runoff areas with special abrasive tarmac and things designed to get the cars to slow down. Paul Ricard, also, it is one of the places where the FIA will go testing on occasion, testing different barriers and different safety devices on the cars, things like that. So it is a proper Formula One circuit. However, we'll see how exciting it is. It does have a very long straight on the Grand Prix layout. However, there are 2 chicanes which will be run on that long straight. Hamilton with DRS. On board with Charles Leclerc, coming down start-finish into turn 1. Undoubtedly, Leclerc will be thinking about the brake failure he had 2 weeks ago in Monaco. Ironically enough, it was Brendan Hartley who was victim to Leclerc's brake failure there in Monaco. However, everything does appear to be in good order on board that Sauber. Lewis Hamilton definitely out there on a charge at the moment. Meanwhile, Valtteri Bottas, a 1:13.992. Fastest lap of the race. First guy in the 13s. Anyway, Lewis Hamilton fighting Daniel Ricciardo now. He is within 1 second of the Australian. He will have DRS once again. Can he do anything to take P4 today? The gap between Vettel and Bottas at the front, 4.3 seconds. Vettel still in no immediate danger from the Finn. However, last time by a 1:14.048 for Valtteri Bottas. Sebastian Vettel last time by a 1:14.789. Vettel does have to pick up the pace a little bit if he wants to retain the lead by race end. Pierre Gasly on the radio to the Toro Rosso guys. Some issues with the brakes. That is not at all surprising around this circuit. Big, long braking zones here, all coming off of very high speeds. Sergio Perez apparently doing 300 kilometers an hour in 4th gear, if the FOM graphics are to be believed. I don't really know why we've seen this year, but the TV coverage in terms of the graphics on the screen and things of that nature, they've been very sloppy this year. Meanwhile, the world feed following this fight between Magnussen and Perez for P13. Magnussen has it, Perez wants it. Perez will have DRS assistance on the Haas in front, and indeed he does. Looking to see if the Mexican can attack the Dane into the final chicane. He is unable. He will remain in DRS range down start-finish. However, the Haas is able to pull away in the acceleration zone through the exit past the Wall of Champions. Perez not close enough for an attack into turn 1 or 2. Working lap 55 of 70. The interval at the front between Vettel and Bottas remains 3.2 seconds. Last time by, Sebastian Vettel a 1:15.038. Bottas last time by a 1:14.215. Personal best for Max Verstappen in P3 with a 1:14.132. Lewis Hamilton remains stuck behind Daniel Ricciardo in P5. Red Bull radio to Max Verstappen saying good pace, and whoa, what's happened here? Valtteri Bottas goes off in turn 1. Not entirely sure why he was sent off. There's a Renault running in his vicinity. Bottas still classified in P2. Is that lap traffic and Bottas was balked? We need a replay of this. What happened? On board with Bottas in replay. That is Carlos Sainz in the Renault. Bottas attempting to lap the Renault, and Bottas just completely overcooks it, braking into turn 1. Did the Renault kind of mess him up on his braking marks? There was no contact. The Renault wasn't even that close to the Mercedes. Bottas completely caught out there. The gap now between Vettel and Bottas, 5.2 seconds. Carlos Sainz still remains in front of Bottas on track. Bottas classified in P2. Carlos Sainz is a lap down. Bottas now lapping Carlos Sainz without incident. I do have to say, we have seen Valtteri Bottas in a position like this before, within a theoretical shout of winning a race. Bottas has been lapping consistently faster than Sebastian Vettel for the last few laps. However, he just doesn't have the ability to get on the pace toward the end of the race where it really matters. I think we saw this most starkly in Bahrain when Vettel, on an improvised one-stop strategy, for the last 10 laps, his tires were completely destroyed, and Bottas had the faster car with the faster tires in that moment. He was unable to pressure Sebastian Vettel, who was practically limping home to win the Bahrain Grand Prix. And we're seeing it again. Valtteri Bottas, toward the end of the race, he just comes off the boil, and he is unable to convert any advantages into a race-winning position. I'll go out on a limb here and say that if Valtteri Bottas is driving that Mercedes in 2019, Mercedes just didn't have any other options, because he is clearly not up to snuff of driving for a front-running team. As far as driver of the day voting, yes, it is open for those of you who want to participate. I think we've got a pretty good list of potential candidates for driver of the day. Obviously, I think Vettel would certainly be in the running for that. Meanwhile, he's just set fastest lap at 1:13.964. Romain Grosjean has had a pretty nice day. He's running in P12 now, but he was as high as 8th at one point. Raikkonen having a quiet day in 6th. If he were able to hold off Lewis Hamilton, he would have been driver of the day in my book, but I'm not seeing that right now. I'm not quite sure who I'm going to vote for, but it's a non-event anyway. Coming within 10 laps to go in this 2018 Canadian Grand Prix. Crofty there reporting from the pit lane from the back of the Ferrari garage. Everybody appears to be very relaxed down there. Sebastian's just managing the pace, managing the car. Everything appears to be copacetic on board the SF71H. Vettel leads from Valtteri Bottas by 7.293 through the last interval. Red Bull pit wall. Chief Technical Officer for Red Bull Racing, Adrian Newey, looking on. His cars run in 3rd and 4th, Verstappen and Ricciardo respectively. Not a bad points haul for the Austrian team. However, they really don't have an answer for Valtteri Bottas or for Sebastian Vettel today. Both Red Bulls are ahead of Lewis Hamilton for the time being. Hamilton 1.5 seconds behind Daniel Ricciardo in P5. Officially working lap 60 of 70. 10 laps to go. Looking at the Mercedes pit wall, some somewhat long faces there. They're not in a winning position. Bottas has dropped back even more from Sebastian Vettel. 8 seconds is now the gap. And yes, I do have to agree with everyone's assessments here. Fernando Alonso not going to stay at McLaren next year. I have to believe that we are not misguided in that assumption. Also, that could mean the end of Fernando Alonso's Formula One career. However, it will not be the end of his racing career, not by any stretch of the imagination. Fernando Alonso wants to complete the supposed triple crown of motorsport, winning the Formula One World Championship, winning the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and winning the Indy 500. Alonso's already made one attempt at the Indy 500. He did very well in 2017, but Honda struck again, and he had to retire. Alonso is making a run at Le Mans next weekend with the Toyota team. It should be a fairly straightforward affair if all goes well. That Toyota is very quick. We'll see how he gets on in Les Sarthe. However, Fernando Alonso certainly wants that triple crown. Yes, interesting comments here about the top 6 being so far ahead of everybody else. The gap between Kimi Räikkönen and Nico Hülkenberg is 62 seconds. World Feed picking up Lance Stroll, already talking to the media. Obviously a very brief and disappointing day for the only Canadian in the field. And now in replay, that incident between Lance Stroll and Brendan Hartley on lap 1. Again, that was a very scary incident for the New Zealander. Red Bull radio to Daniel Ricciardo saying, hey, your batteries are full and Hamilton's getting DRS, so get on with it. Again, if Hamilton finishes 4th, he'll retain the championship lead no matter what happens to Sebastian Vettel. Gap between Ricciardo and Hamilton is 0.736. Hamilton has DRS. Yes, Jonathan Straitman, I think that's what we were all silently thinking there, watching that replay on board with Lance Stroll in that incident with Brendan Hartley. That halo, yeah, it's there, and it does provide some level of protection to the driver's head, but that nose on the Toro Rosso did get rather close to the cockpit there, and if it did manage to thread its way underneath the halo, it would have been guided quite neatly by the cockpit surround and the center stay of halo right into Lance Stroll's head. So having the halo there, I don't really think it helps affairs. If anything, it provides a little bit of a gun sight sort of device to guide debris into the cockpit, particularly if it is rather slender like the front end of a Formula One car. It is very rare that we see those sort of 90-degree nose-on T-bone accidents, but in a case where we do see one, particularly if a car is somewhat airborne there, as Brendan Hartley's car was with the front suspension collapsing underneath the front end of the car, I do say that the halo provides more of a danger than a protection. Also, if anybody watched the IndyCar race last night from Texas, we did see a very scary incident with Matheus Leist right in the beginning of the race. The car burst into flames within the first 5 laps of running there in Texas, and Leist was able to get himself out of the cockpit very quickly indeed. There's a fire in the cockpit. And I was watching that occur, thinking, well, if Leist had to climb around the halo, he would have taken at least 10 seconds to get out of there, and within 10 seconds of that fire starting, the car was completely engulfed. It really did make me wonder as to the merits of this device, which was put on the cars in the name of safety. On board, looking rearward from Daniel Ricciardo's car at Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton is 0.935 seconds behind the Australian. We have a lapped car in between, one of the Renaults. Hamilton will have to negotiate that. Meanwhile, the Renault playing nice spoiler for Daniel Ricciardo at the moment. Lewis Hamilton has negotiated that lap traffic. He is now released once again in pursuit of Daniel Ricciardo. Meanwhile, Max Verstappen with the fastest lap of the race, a 1:13.864. The gap between Ricciardo and Hamilton for P4, 0.869. Working lap 66 of 70, 4 laps to go. Mercedes telling Hamilton basically to put it in party mode. HPP 1, high performance power 1. That's going to give Hamilton all the power he potentially has in that Mercedes to get after Daniel Ricciardo. Will it be enough? Meanwhile, on board with our race leader, Sebastian Vettel, running serenely here, 7.8 seconds ahead of position 2, Valtteri Bottas, just completing lap 66. Only one pit stop done today for Sebastian Vettel. He continues to run on those super soft tires. Everything looks 100% under control in that SF71H cockpit. Masterful drive from pole position by Sebastian Vettel, within 3 laps now of taking the win in the Canadian Grand Prix. Meanwhile, Valtteri Bottas has to be careful. He could well fall into the clutches of Max Verstappen as things run right now. Verstappen is only 1.6 seconds behind Bottas. Bottas is 7.5 seconds behind Sebastian Vettel, so no chance of Bottas fighting with Vettel. But Verstappen smells blood, and he is definitely going to go for it in these closing 3 laps. On board with Lewis Hamilton, running in party mode in pursuit of Daniel Ricciardo. He is tucked up right underneath the rear wing now of that Red Bull. Red Bull gets a little bit better of a launch out of the hairpin. However, Hamilton easily will have DRS assistance down the back straight and down start finish as well. What will be the closing speed? Daniel Ricciardo also has DRS, coincidentally, as he is negotiating, I believe, Sergei Sirotkin in front. Obviously, he is several laps down at this point. Indeed, that is Sirotkin running a lap down ahead of Ricciardo and Hamilton on track. Slow motion replay, Lewis Hamilton getting quite sideways through the hairpin there. 2 laps to go, working 68 of 70. Lewis Hamilton now stuck behind Sergei Sirotkin through the fast, twisty bits in Sector 1. He lost a whole ton of time there. The gap between Ricciardo and Hamilton now 0.9 of a second. Through the hairpin for Ricciardo and Hamilton. Hamilton pretty much in the same place he was this time last lap. He'll get DRS assistance. Ricciardo should not have DRS, though, as he has cleared the lap traffic in front of him. Clear track ahead for Daniel Ricciardo, and no DRS on the Red Bull. Hamilton able to close up to within 0.7 of a second to Daniel Ricciardo. Now 0.6 is the gap. Hamilton has DRS again down start-finish. He is starting to gain on the Red Bull, but he's still not close enough to do a reasonable attack into turn 1, and also lots of brake dust flying out from the front wheels of that Mercedes in the braking zones. The brakes have to be pretty close to being finished here. Meanwhile, Ricciardo still keeping it on the island. The gap between Hamilton and Ricciardo, 0.6 of a second. Ricciardo goes purple in Sector 1. Ricciardo, to his credit, he is doing everything he needs to do to keep the Mercedes behind. The gap is 1.3 seconds. If that remains through the detection zone, Hamilton will not have DRS this time by. And I do believe that has occurred. Hamilton with no DRS assistance here to close out this lap. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel has begun lap 69 of 70. World Feed picking up the Red Bull pit wall there, and now picking up Lewis Hamilton again in pursuit. Checkered flag is being shown. Why is the checkered flag being shown here? The race leader. There we go. Checkered flag is being waved on lap 69. Sebastian Vettel is still running the final lap. The checkered flag was being displayed on lap 69. Why has that happened? Has the race officially ended, seeing the checkered flag was thrown? We're not seeing final classification being shown. We are still working lap 70 of 70. Sebastian Vettel crossed the line under the checkered flag on lap 69. This is going to be a fight. Through the final corner, here comes Sebastian Vettel, taking the checkered flag for the second time. Victory for the German in Canada. However, did he technically win it 1 lap ago? Meanwhile, Valtteri Bottas finishing in P2. Max Verstappen in P3. Daniel Ricciardo takes fastest lap on the last lap, a 1:13.835. Lewis Hamilton finishes in 5th. That means that Sebastian Vettel has retaken lead in the Drivers' Championship by 1 point over Lewis Hamilton. Well, whether it happened on lap 69 or lap 70, we have a Ferrari victory once again in Formula 1. Sebastian Vettel, great drive from pole position. That is what you call dominance. The only thing he didn't get this weekend, fastest lap. Daniel Ricciardo stole that on the last lap, a 1:13.835. Sebastian Vettel also wins Driver of the Day. Sebastian Vettel there going through the runoff zone in the hairpin. I almost thought he might have done some donuts, but he thinks better of it. We definitely have some questions to be asking at the end of this race here. Why was the checkered flag displayed on lap 69? That is the end of the session. The checkered flag means session complete. Technically speaking, this race ended on lap 69. This is going to be a bit of a fight. I don't think we had any changes of position on lap 70, but had we would have had certainly a trip to the World Motorsport Council over that. Meanwhile, race winner Sebastian Vettel pulls into Parc Fermé. And he climbs out of the SF71H victorious here in Canada. Sebastian Vettel making his way past the barricades there, trying to find his teammates, and there they are. Ferrari don't seem all that enthusiastic about having won this race, do they? I will say Ferrari definitely needed that win. It brings them right back into the championship hunt, and of course Sebastian Vettel takes the lead of the Drivers' Championship by 1 point over Lewis Hamilton. Sebastian Vettel, 121 points on the board. Lewis Hamilton, 120. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes retained the lead with 206 points scored. Ferrari add 33 points to their tally today for 189. Getting word that the post-race interviews will be conducted by Paul di Resta, former Force India and Williams driver. Let's hear what Vettel has to say. Vettel being quite gracious here, saying that yes, it's my 50th race victory, but Ferrari haven't won here since 2004, so it's really cool to be able to bring them back to the winner's circle. De Resta now making his way over to interview Valtteri Bottas, who, again, we have to say, this guy blew his chance. He was running faster than Vettel at several occasions throughout this race consistently. However, he just couldn't lap Carlos Sainz. Bottas typically not saying anything of consequence, and Max Verstappen now. Will he headbutt Paul Di Resta? We'll have to wait and see. Verstappen seems reasonably satisfied with his third-place finish. Maurizio Arrivabene, he looks reasonably content with all of that. Waiting for the drivers now to make their way up into the prep room and then onto the podium. There we go. They've made it into the prep room there, just doing their official FIA weigh-in. See if we can do any eavesdropping here. Alright, just typical post-race banter there between Vettel and Verstappen. Bottas nowhere to be found. All of the team personnel and some marshals and some fans have assembled there below the podium area. A couple of FIA boffins already taking a look at the top three cars. And it appears that we're going to see a trophy presentation before the anthems here. Or was that just another mess up by the graphics guys? We're about to find out. Top three finishers now on the podium. Sebastian Vettel looking reasonably jubilant, I would say. Stand by for the German and Italian national anthems. Sebastian Vettel receiving the winner's trophy there. Certainly he appears to be very happy indeed, returning to the top step of the podium this year. And also the first time in a little while that we haven't seen Lewis Hamilton on the podium. I have to say, just an interesting set of circumstances starting to brew here at Mercedes. Valtteri Bottas, despite not really having the all-out pace to fight for a win, and we saw this in Bahrain, and we've seen it again today in Canada, he's outperforming Lewis Hamilton on occasion. This is certainly an interesting development. Also an interesting point to be made, Canada, we said at the top of all this that it's a bit of an unconventional circuit. Well, it's basically just long straights and tight chicanes, so in terms of the places that we visit in Formula One, it's a little bit of an outlier. Good point to be made. How will Ferrari and Mercedes get on at Silverstone, which is very much a more conventional circuit with long flowing sections and lots of high-speed corners, essentially no high-speed corners here in Canada. We'll see what the balance of that aero benefit is, Mercedes over Ferrari or Ferrari over Mercedes. Spa, of course, another very traditional circuit. It could be strong for either team, but first we have to go to France in 2 weeks, which could also suit Ferrari very nicely. I would say the layout at Paul Ricard that Formula One will be using is somewhat similar to the layout here in Montreal, so we'll see what that is able to yield. Also, we do have the unknown variables of what's the weather going to be like, how is that track surface going to be. No Formula One team really has run at Paul Ricard since 1990, at least not in full race trim, so we do have a lot to learn in 2 weeks from France. Sky Sports talking to Arriva Benede here. He definitely seems quite content with that. Nico Rosberg basically conducting this interview. Cool to see that. All in all, a very good day for Ferrari. The final race order here from the 2018 Canadian Grand Prix looks a little bit like this. P1 and the victory for Sebastian Vettel. P2, Valtteri Bottas for Mercedes. P3, Max Verstappen of Red Bull. P4, Daniel Ricciardo, also of Red Bull. P5, Lewis Hamilton in the second Mercedes there. Unable to challenge Daniel Ricciardo consistently for P4, Hamilton loses the lead in the World Championship. P6, Kimi Räikkönen in the second Ferrari. P7, Nico Hülkenberg in the first of the Renaults, followed immediately home in 8th by his teammate Carlos Sainz. P9 for Esteban Ocon in the first of the Force Indias, and P10 and a point for Charles Leclerc in the Sauber. P11 for Pierre Gasly in the sole remaining Toro Rosso. P12 for Romain Grosjean. A quiet day, but a solid day for the Frenchman after blowing up in qualifying. P13, Grosjean's teammate Kevin Magnussen in the second Haas. P14, Sergio Perez in the second Force India. P15, Marcus Ericsson in the second Sauber. P16, Stoffel Van Dorn in the sole remaining McLaren. And P17, Sergei Sirotkin, last car classified in the sole remaining Williams. Out of this race are Fernando Alonso, who retired with some sort of mechanical problem later on in the race, and Lance Stroll and Brendan Hartley retiring on the first lap in a mutual accident. And with that, we will conclude our live stream today of the 2018 Canadian Grand Prix. Once again, victory to Ferrari and to Sebastian Vettel. The Drivers' Championship, all of a sudden, it has come back to life. I'd like to thank you all very much for sticking with us here, and I hope you enjoyed today's coverage. Until next time, Ferrariman601 saying thank you very much, and we will see you soon.